Esta semana vimos a muchos republicanos volverse en contra de Donald Trump. Ya sea Marjorie Taylor Greene diciendo que las cosas actualmente no son nada accesibles. Y los hombres republicanos MAGA son individuos débiles y patéticos. Ya sea congresistas republicanos MAGA como Don Bacon diciendo que Donald Trump ha sido muy débil con respecto a Ucrania. O senadores republicanos MAGA diciendo que los ataques de Donald Trump hacia estos barcos en el Caribe son esencialmente ataques ilegales. Que Donald Trump tomó una decisión muy equivocada al negarse a permitir que los demócratas participaran en la sesión informativa conjunta sobre la que estaba ocurriendo con el tema de estos barcos y el ataque ilegal que hizo Donald. Una sesión informativa conjunta normalmente también incluye a los demócratas. Tienes a congresistas republicanos MAGA y senadores republicanos MAGA empezando a decir, mira, lo que está pasando con este cierre de gobierno está aplastando a todos los republicanos MAGA, justo ahora que se acercan las elecciones de medio término. Mientras que el Congreso republicano está diciendo, tienes que traernos de vuelta al Capitolio. Mike Johnson es una imagen muy mala cuando los electores están viendo que no estamos trabajando. Ya sabes, él puede mentir una y otra vez diciendo que están trabajando, pero la verdad es que ni siquiera pueden hacer asambleas públicas. ¿Por qué tienen miedo? Porque sí, actualmente en estos distritos republicanos la gente los odia. Ellos dicen, así que podemos fingir al menos que estamos trabajando en Washington DC. Y por supuesto que has visto nuestra cobertura en el Senado esta semana, donde el Senado, en conjunto con 4 senadores republicanos, votaron en contra de estos aranceles contra Brasil. Y luego votaron para cancelar los aranceles en contra de Canadá. Básicamente para cancelar los aranceles de Donald Trump en contra del mundo. Y mira, yo aún diría que estos republicanos MAGA se mueven en sincronía con Donald Trump, ya que el gobierno sigue cerrado y los republicanos MAGA todavía permiten que Donald Trump se comporte como un autoritario. Pero creo que vale la pena señalar estos casos específicos. Doy este ejemplo. Marjorie Taylor Greene fue a The View, fue al programa de Bill Maher, y luego fue a un podcast llamado The Shipwrecked Show Badlands, que dice que los hombres republicanos en su partido, dice, son débiles y patéticos, y dice que está muy furiosa con el comportamiento de ellos. También dice que Adelita Grijalva ya debió haber sido juramentada como congresista, y ha atacado a los republicanos MAGA por no tener ni un plan para ayudar con los precios de atención médica. Esto es lo que dijeron en ese podcast. Mira, por favor.
And I'm so angry at my own party, and I'm angry at all the men in leadership in the House and the Senate, and I'm like, you guys are weak and pathetic. And so that is my viewpoint, because I'm a business owner, and I think of these are our customers, and we have a responsibility to serve our customers, and we have a responsibility to take care of our employees. And then also I'm a mom, and I think you always take care of your children. No matter what, you go above and beyond to take care of your kids and make sure they're safe, make sure they're, everything about it is good for them and their future. And I'll just tell you, I'm beyond pissed off at my own party and the leadership in the House and the Senate that they are totally blowing it.
Luego siguió repitiendo esto una y otra vez. Así, hay hombres republicanos patéticos, en su mayoría influencers, pagados en redes sociales, que me atacan por ir al programa de Bill Maher y a The View. No lo siento, no obedezco las demandas de hombres republicanos de que como mujer debo de ser vista pero no escuchada. Luego habla de los precios de la atención médica, ya sabes, de estas primas que están a punto de dispararse al cielo. Por todo esto porque los republicanos se niegan a extender los subsidios para la ACA, o sea, la Ley de Cuidados de Salud accesibles, porque si esto se extiende podrían tal vez mantener los precios bajos. Y dice, miren, esto es para padres casados y autónomos en sus 30 con 4 hijos. Los demócratas hicieron esto con Obamacare hace 15 años. Y Johnson dijo que los republicanos tienen un plan misterioso que aún no ha sido revelado para arreglarlo. Pero nadie sabe cuál es. Y nos dicen que nos quedemos en nuestros distritos. Este es el plan. Las primas mensuales serán de $3.600 al mes o hasta $3.800 al mes. Estamos hablando de $36.000 al año. Así que si los republicanos siguen negándose a extender los subsidios para la ACA, o sea, la Ley de Cuidados de Salud accesible, probablemente el rango que las familias normales de clase media paguen al año será de $20.000 por su cobertura médica. Incluso muchos otros van a tener que pagar $35.000 o $36.000. Y solo quiero decir esto, cuando pensamos en atención médica hay varias opciones. La opción 1 es la que más me gusta, la atención médica universal, o sea que la atención médica sea gratuita. Esta sucede cuando el gobierno financia la atención médica y le cobra más impuestos a la gente multimillonaria. Para mí, esta es una estrategia muy correcta, ya que la atención médica es imprescindible. Y para esto lo que tendría que pasar es que le aumenten módicamente los impuestos a los multimillonarios. Así podrías financiar la atención médica para todos. O tal vez no completamente gratis, pero sí hacerla mucho más accesible. Pero esto es lo que yo apoyo y esto es algo que se ve en la mayoría de países del mundo. Por ejemplo, en Argentina hay atención médica universal. y Argentina fue un país al que Donald Trump hace muy poco le dio 40.000 millones de dólares para apoyarlo. La otra forma de hacerlo es el Obamacare, que está subsidiado. Esta se subsidia para tener las primas médicas mensuales lo más bajas posibles. Pero aún así las primas médicas bajo Obamacare son un poco altas. Pero claro, son mucho mejores de lo que estaban antes de que llegara el Obamacare. Porque sí, en esos tiempos, antes del Obamacare, eran primas gigantescas. Y en esos tiempos, o la gente se quedaba sin dinero por pagar los seguros, o sencillamente perdían la vida por enfermedades que, aunque se podían resolver, no tenían el dinero para pagarlas. Entonces, si quieres inventar un tercer plan, y tienes al senador republicano MAGA Scott de Florida, quien estuvo involucrado en el mayor fraude criminal de Medicaid de la historia de Estados Unidos, él dice que tiene un plan médico, pero no quiere decir cuál es. Y hablan de las fuerzas del mercado y de mantener la competencia, y de eliminar los grupos de alto riesgo, lo que significa volver a discriminar por condiciones preexistentes. Bueno, pues aquí está el asunto. Muéstrame cuál es ese otro plan. Obamacare, por ejemplo, pudo haber sido más accesible, pero el problema es que los republicanos se han encargado de hacer que esto sea más caro cada vez, pues no han permitido que los demócratas hagan las cosas como ellos han querido, pues como no están a favor de los demócratas, creen que todo lo que quieren hacer está mal, ya que esto fue aprobado hace más de 10 años. Los republicanos MAGA siempre han tratado de destruir el Obamacare, incluso han ido a la Corte Suprema de Estados Unidos para desmantelarlo. Han impedido otras formas de que los precios bajen aún más, y creo que lo que hay que hacer es hacerlo más barato. Pero los republicanos MAGA quieren hacer lo contrario para financiar sus recortes de impuestos a los multimillonarios. Y aquí está el asunto. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Si Donald Trump dice que se ha encargado de ingresar 22 billones de dólares a Estados Unidos, lo cual por cierto es mentira, entonces deberíamos de tener mucho éxito, deberíamos de tener mucho más dinero para poder financiar el Medicaid, para poder financiar el Obamacare y mantener los subsidios al ACA, o sea, la ley de cuidados de salud accesibles. Y poder así con todo ese dinero que dice Donald Trump haber obtenido, tener incluso salud médica universal, o sea, gratuita. Pero como todos sabemos, es mentira que Donald Trump trajo esa cantidad tan increíble de dinero. Entonces, Marjorie Taylor Greene publica lo siguiente. El pueblo estadounidense está siendo aplastado por los costos de atención médica que se disparan. La póliza de mi familia pasó de $800 a más de $2.400 al mes. Es más que nuestra propia hipoteca, y va a empeorar aún más en enero. Los demócratas nos impusieron Obamacare, pero los republicanos no han hecho nada para arreglar el desastre que creó. Estoy denunciando a mi propio partido porque esto es inaceptable. Necesitamos liderazgo, necesitamos un plan que reduzca las primas y que vuelva a poner al pueblo estadounidense en primer lugar. Bueno, Marjorie, ¿por qué no haces esto? ¿Por qué no empiezas por el Obamacare? ¿Por qué no lo subsidias en vez de que Estados Unidos tenga un gasto militar de $1 billón? ¿Qué pasaría si el gasto militar de Estados Unidos fuera de 450.000 millones de dólares? Podrías tomar lo que te sobra de dinero y financiar la atención médica. ¿Qué pasaría si le aumentas un poco los impuestos a los multimillonarios? Con esos millones y millones de dólares extra, podrías fácilmente financiar la atención médica, tal vez no gratuita, pero sí al menos tenerla en costos mínimos. Claro, para ellos esto es socialismo o tal vez marxismo. Miren este clip, por favor.
The other part of this, though, is what is going to happen with these subsidies, because the thing that Republicans have argued is if Democrats would reopen the government, then you can have the conversation about what to do on that. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that Republicans don't have a plan on how to bring down healthcare costs. If the government reopened tomorrow, do you think Republican leaders have a plan on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I like her. She came out to Ohio a few times. She's certainly able to write a bill herself. Like if this is something she's passionate about, put pen to paper, write a bill, present an option. Don't just criticize what other people are doing. In terms of what Republicans think is that the marketplace should work. What Obamacare has proven is that it's a total abject failure at keeping costs affordable, ironically, in the name.
Well, you know, our normal way that we interdict drugs is that we board ships and we find out if they have drugs on them. It's interesting that as the boats have been exploded and as we've used this deadly force, when there are survivors, we don't try them for drug crimes or we don't even keep them. We've been sending them back. So we repatriated last week somebody to Colombia and somebody to Ecuador. So you would think that when there are survivors that they would be tried for a drug crime. You would think we would be hearing evidence that they're collecting drugs that are floating around in the water afterwards. You'd think we'd hear evidence that the people were armed. So we don't know their names. We have no evidence of who they are other than an accusation that they are drug dealers. But we also, in our country, haven't typically just killed people because we accuse them of being a drug dealer. Even convicted drug dealers are usually not given the death penalty. So there's a lot here that it's easy to be angry with people. But if we get rid of the idea of presumption of innocence and we're just going to blow up people on boats with a 25% potential error rate, I think yes, I have problems with that.
And I can certainly understand that. I think if you want to be a pragmatist and you're not concerned with, all of I think American ideals of due process and things like that, we have a serious drug problem on this continent, and a lot of people die from drugs. So this would be a way to really kind of clamp down on it. It might not be too traditionally American in its form.
Esto es lo que dice Rand Paul justo ahí. Y te comparto también, después de escuchar lo que dice Rand Paul, lo que dice Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, el secretario de Defensa de Estados Unidos, pregunta que por qué no se procesa penalmente a las personas sobrevivientes de los ataques de Estados Unidos a estos barcos pesqueros en las costas del Caribe, costas de Venezuela y Colombia. Es extraño que los ataquen diciendo que son tipos malos, pero luego los terminen dejando en libertad si sobreviven a este ataque tan espantoso que tuvieron. Y luego de esto Pete Hegseth da un montón de palabrería. Miren el clip, por favor.
On the strikes, Ecuador decided not to prosecute one of the survivors of the previous strikes. Did the U.S. have enough evidence to identify that individual as a drug trafficker? And if so, why did the U.S. not try him in court?
So we definitely have the evidence. One thing that's been highly misconstrued here is that in some way we don't know precisely who we're striking and why, what those affiliations are, what they're carrying, where they're going. As I've said before, just like Al-Qaeda in the Middle East, we understood that. We know how to map networks and hunt enemies of our country, terrorists, and in this case, that's what's happening. I mentioned this in another meeting too. There were moments in Iraq and Afghanistan when we were fighting terrorists where we would have to hand those terrorists over to a host nation and believe that they would prosecute them, want them to prosecute them. Sometimes, sadly, tragically, they wouldn't be held. We jokingly called it the Iraqi catch and release program, where there was no prosecution when there should have been. And frankly, it made our jobs more difficult and dangerous on the battlefield. Now you're having to relitigate that. In some cases, we understand by handing people over to host countries, they may treat that situation differently, even if we present that evidence. It's a risk you have to take, but it doesn't change how we're focusing on these narco-terrorists. They are the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, and we will strike them wherever we find them. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, are you presenting the evidence to Congress?
Oh, we are presenting it to Congress. We have time and time again. On a bipartisan basis, they have been given the evidence directly.
Luego déjame compartir contigo lo que dice este congresista republicano MAGA, que aunque dice que no es MAGA, dirá que es moderado. Él es Dan Bacon de Nebraska. Él habla sobre cómo Donald Trump y el secretario de Defensa Pete Hegseth han sido muy débiles con el tema de Ucrania y ahora están retirando las tropas de Rumania, lo que envía una señal terrible a Ucrania. Esto es lo que tiene que decir, por favor mira el clip.
U.S. announcing plans to withdraw some troops from Romania and NATO's eastern flank. Here's Wicker in opposition to that. So, we watch this, obviously, with what's going on in Ukraine and what have you. Is this a big deal? What did you make of it?
Well, Chairman Wicker is absolutely right. So is Chairman Rogers on the House side, two Republican chairmen who criticized this move. The president has been, I would say, fairly weak on NATO, fairly weak on Ukraine, but the leadership of the Pentagon are even worse. The Secretary of Defense and his Undersecretary for Policy, they come off as being anti-Europe. In fact, it was Secretary of Defense Hegseth himself in that Signal chat told President or Vice President Vance that he found Europeans loathsome as much as he did. That's their attitude. We got to realize the hot war is in Europe right now. It's the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We need a U.S. presence for deterrence. Romania and Poland and the Baltics desperately want our presence to serve as a deterrence. And to have this president, or in this case, maybe it's the Secretary of Defense doing it without the president's approval, but to have him remove troops sends a terrible message to NATO, a terrible message to Ukraine, and unfortunately, a terrible message to Putin.
The government shut down itself. You can go a couple weeks, but as you pointed out, our economy is not great. There's a lot of strain. This injects another degree of uncertainty and distraction in the economy, and it's going to affect. And we're going to see WIC go away. We're going to see benefits of people that really need help. They won't be able to get it.
A couple of months ago, you said that what was necessary to end this war would be a conversation between President Trump and President Putin, but there have now been multiple phone calls between the two of them, and yet the war in Ukraine goes on. Does this speak to any weakness in terms of the president's ability to negotiate an end to this conflict, or why does it persist despite them having spoken?
Well, this is a war that the president inherited, right? He got elected and it had already been going on, and no progress had been made to that point towards peace of any kind. In fact, there had not even been any meetings between the Ukrainians and the Russians for quite some time. So while there's been some humanitarian exchanges made, obviously that's our goal here, is to end this war and any role we can play. So this is not a war that started under President Trump. It's a war that wouldn't have happened had he been president, but now it's here. And we'll continue to engage and do everything we can and hopefully make progress. As I said, and I've said repeatedly, look, we are, if we see an opportunity to make a difference in this, we're going to take it and we're going to pursue it. And that's what the president has done. And he deserves tremendous credit for having multiple phone calls with leaders from both countries and anybody else.
What should Republicans be doing in the House as it pertains to just randomly blowing up these boats?
Well, everybody's very concerned. From our classified briefing that we had yesterday, everyone is very, very concerned, of course, about the drug trade and the impact in the United States, the deaths that have occurred, and impacting the flow of drugs into the United States. People are similarly very concerned about what the administration is doing with the deaths that are occurring, with the blowing up of the boats. Yesterday, there were not very good answers as to, what is the standard, what is occurring with the designation of cartels as terrorist organizations. We understand that the structure of these cartels, and designating them as terrorist organizations makes sense. But what is the standard? What is occurring in this? How is it being determined as to how military force is being utilized and being applied in this situation?
Mr. Chairman, did you get the answers that you were looking for yesterday, Mr. Chairman?
No, and in fact, lawyers were supposed to be in the room. They were not. People were very frustrated in the information that was being provided. It was a bipartisan briefing, but people were not happy with the level of information that was provided, and certainly the level of legal justification that was provided.
It's obvious why a target list is classified. Why is the legal rationale?
I don't have any freaking idea. If you've got a valid legal opinion, wouldn't you want to share it with every member? If you believe, I think the administration does, that we know these guys are bad guys, wouldn't you want to catch them and show the world the drugs and show their history of bad activities? The idea that they were afraid, I guess, of a War Powers Act, and they're going to cherry pick Republican senators and share it only with them. Come on, we've been doing this stuff for a while. It's never worked this way. This is U.S. Government 101. And frankly, not to be divided and used as political pawns. And the truth is as well, my Republican colleagues bear responsibility as well. Every senator, regardless of party, should have a say on how military force is used. And frankly, Congress has a right and obligation to understand the legal basis. My proudest tenure has been on the Intelligence Committee, and I am proud of its record. I've served under Democrats, Republicans. I've been chair of the committee. I can tell you, Saxby Chambliss, Dianne Feinstein, Richard Burr would have never allowed this to happen. So the question I got from my Republican senators, if you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of 8 level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats? Who was willing to say, isn't there a constitutional obligation here? It is about separation of powers. For the folks who wave their Constitution around, read the damn thing. And then explain why you would sit through that briefing and not call foul.
Y bueno amigos, acabamos de llegar al final del video. Espero de todo corazón que te haya gustado. Y si fue así, por favor, házmelo saber dentro de los comentarios. Además, si este video te gustó, te va a encantar suscribirte al canal, ya que subo videos como esto todos los días. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido con informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.